Good evening, here in the House of Hidden Marion, those who came, and all the others around, hopefully internationally. We come together tonight to direct our thoughts to a next epoch, a next part of Dr. Steiner's biography, which we call his time in the studio, atelier. Sickbed is maybe not a terminus he would love to hear, but in fact he was very sick and he had to be in the bed, not all the time, but more and more. So we think in the direction of these last 6 months, and it started exactly today, 1st of October 1924, he moved into the studio. The day before, Mary Steiner has left with a eurythmy group for quite important and well-recognized performances in Hamburg, in Bremen, which is in the north of Germany, and Kassel in the middle. So there were 1,000 people on each place seeing these performances. So at this time, these were really big public events. And she didn't want to go because she realized how weak he is. But he said, it's organized, it's on the program, people wait. We have to go on with anthroposophy beyond all these obstacles and hinderings. So she had to leave, and it was difficult for her to go at this point. We know that 2 days before, one day before, 30th of September, yesterday, Ita Wegman cabled, sent 2 telegrams to colleagues of her, very gifted doctors, Ludwig Noll in Kassel and Eberhard Schickler in Stuttgart, to come urgently to assist. The tone or the atmosphere in these telegrams, as far as we can judge such little sentences, is in need, an acute situation. And we know from an historical point of view that more or less they took over the clinic for her. She had to stay here, and also Ludwig Noll assisted her partly. So we don't know exactly about the days before. We know that Dr. Steiner cancelled the lectures intended to give, and also a class lesson, and the farmers' meeting with the results of Kobowitz, or since then. So the days before were difficult. So it is not correct, independent of language, to say that the so-called sickbed started in the 1st of October. Also during these courses in September, when he had a break, he was sometimes lying down and in the atelier. So he was quite weak before. And it's very difficult to judge the onset of the so-called disease or sickbed, but this is not our main topic. Today, some or most of you, I don't know, who is listening, know the atelier of Dr. Steiner at the Goethe-Arnhem Hill. For those who don't know, it's quite a big room, but an artist's room in the carpentry building complex. A totally modest room. That means in the sense of warmth, there was only an oven with a long pipe. It was cold from downstairs because the wooden floor was directly laying on the earth. So there was no fundament, as we call it. There was only a skylight. Very wonderful place, especially for an artist, for sculpture. If you are very ill and it's beginning autumn and coming winter, you probably would not prefer to go there. And if it's windy and cold, it was difficult because also the walls, or the wooden walls, they were not absolutely close. So they tried to cover them with papers to make it a little bit better. So I only wanted to say quite difficult conditions for a person who is severely ill. And the decision to go there and not to go to Ita Wegmann's clinic was obviously his own. Mary Steiner, Ita Wegmann, they would have preferred him to have him as a patient there, but he obviously decided to go to his room. And we don't know, these are all theories, but in a way approaching the mystery of Dr. Steiner's life, maybe we have to say that he was absolutely familiar with this room from a spiritual point of view. That means there was the sculpture of Christ since more than 10 years, or since almost 10 years. He was working there with Edith Marion on this central sculpture of the Goethe Annum, the presence of Christ on the level of arts. And it was a place of many important encounters, conversations. If I show sometimes groups, visitors, the place, I never forget to say that it is from this room a lot of the so-called daughter movements of anthroposophy came to life. So the first conversations with the young medical students, or with those who studied theology, about what to do in these faculties, and these conversations which led at the end to courses, which led at the end in the realm of theology to the foundation of the Christmas community, the Christian community. They started there, and many other conversations with the farmers. At the end, there was the course in Kobowitz. So we have almost all disciplines, realms, fields of life, also education. The first conversation with Emil Mold about a possible free school was there. So for me, it is also a kind of, it's not the source of these daughter movements, because the source is anthroposophy, but on the physical plane, it happened a lot in this room. And also in September 1924, that means in the last few weeks, Steiner took in more than 250 new members to the School for Spiritual Science, and all these encounters before happened in his atelier. So they had to come to him, and the conversation and the confirmation that they want to be real members of the school took place there near the statue. So maybe there were spiritual reasons to select this place, which is part of, I would say, the heart of the Goethe Annum Hill. Maybe not geographically, but it became the heart, this room, by the work of Dr. Steiner. And insofar, I don't know, but I think he wanted to be just there and absolutely close to the statue, which was not only a statue. Yeah, but it was a decision. From the anecdotes, I've heard that he said he's going for some days. When he said goodbye to those who lived with him and Mary Steiner and Willa Hansi, he not announced half a year. And we don't know, but probably Dr. Steiner didn't know himself what will be the outcome, how long he will need to recover But he wanted to be healthy again and to go on. It was not at all an intended place to die, I would say. First of all, it was a place to recover exactly in this surrounding, and he did not know. So the 2nd of October, the day after, there was an announcement that the blackboard of the Goetheanum cancelling the next lectures. A week later, 10th of October, it was also announced in the new sheets in this part of the Goetheanum newspapers for the members. And also there was a clear statement by Steiner, I quote, "I do not wish my physical condition to be the cause of all kinds of rumors. The unique," and he's also talking about the unique and devoted care of his dear friend, Dr. Ita Weckmann. He mentioned her also in the last address as his close friend and doctor, and he didn't want that the people in Dornach or in other places discuss about what kind of disease and so on. He announced his decision to go to the atelier, to the studio, to Mary Steiner by a letter. So obviously she was not informed when she left 13th of September. Maybe it was easier for him to say it in a letter. Maybe he took the decision after she went. But he explained her in letters or in the written words the need for this decision. And also he said, "It is true that my forces were largely exhausted in a particular direction at the end of the Apocalypse course. The course for mainly the priests of the Christian community held till the 22nd of September, which was really one of the most spiritual courses Dr. Steiner ever gave. I really needed much strength for such spiritual hates," which is an astonishing sentence. Also, to need strength for the spiritual hate. Emanuel Seilmans always said to me that he thought, Emanuel, that the most difficult challenge for Dr. Steiner was to live on earth, to be incarnated, to be here. He always said he was at home in the spiritual world. So it was difficult to incarnate or to be really here, and not difficult in the sense of that he did not find the balance, but this was the challenge. Not how to find the way to the spiritual world, but to bring it together. And if he's talking about the spiritual strength for the hate, so maybe it is not the strength for the hate, but to express it, to explain it, to make it to a lecture, not living in the spirits, but to bring it to earth. But this is my own interpretation. But he also said to Mary Steiner in the letter, but the main problem of the September 24 with all these lectures were not the lectures, he said, not the courses, not the content, but the people. And he also said, but he was a little bit stressed, I would say. So you can, if you read these letters, you feel that you perceive that he is ill, not ill in the sense of completely ill, but in a way it was a difficult time for him from the beginning on, because then he's saying when people assail you and you have to be available, also you know you don't have enough strength. So in a way he felt consumed, but not by the 70 lectures he gave in September, but by all these personal conversations. So we know that he saw 400 people for personal conversations. They wanted to see him. Sometimes they urged him, and he felt completely exhausted. And but he did not say no. So he said these personal wishes. And of course, he was at the very limit in September, and his main task was to give these courses. And now at the Goethe-Anum last week, we really tried to recapitulate in a conference mainly for the class holders, but also with some other people. We really tried to recapitulate what happened here in September 24. This is not easy, to go in all these courses, to try to understand them, to bring them together, and to get a feeling for this. I don't want to use the word event, because it is such a word in our days, events. But it was something which really happened here on the hill. These 19 days from the onset of the courses, 5th of September, and closing 23rd of September. And then, as you know, 5 days later, he came again for the last address to prepare St. Michael's Day. We also commemorated, of course, Saturday evening, 100 Years Rhythm. We had not a full, but an almost completed big hall. So many people came, and so the last address was read, word by Anne-Catherine Schmidt, and there was also Eurythmy, Michael, Imagination. And we tried to understand the atmosphere. But this was at the end or after the end, before what happened were these 5 to 6 parallel courses for the artists, for the doctors, therapists, for the priests, for the general Anthroposophical Society, for the class members, for the workmen at the Goethe-Anum. And now he said to Marie Steiner, not what I have given. This was always balanced. And he also said this was in good supervision or in good control of Ita Wegmann and mine, he says. So from a medical point of view, this was okay. But then the other things. And then a little bit going deeper, saying, still to Marie Steiner in a letter, I told you some time ago that since January 1923, the higher members of my being have no longer been fully connected with my physical body. In living in the spirit, I lost, as it were, the direct connection with my physical organization. And the opposing powers try to attack the physical body. Yeah, Ita Wegmann, in some, but only small amount of her talks later in the society protected field, talked a little bit about this mystery of Dr. Steiner. Ether body lost the direct connection to his physical body. And she also said that and she quoted him saying to her that he said to her once, compared to other people, I have really died already on earth. He said, my eye and astral body are directing the physical body and complementing the etheric. And Ita Wegmann's explanation or approach to this mystery was that his so-called etheric body was so connected to the building of the first Goethe-Anum. And she said, you know, all the building masters of all old ancient mystery sites, there was always a riddle that they were so connected to the building. So in a way, she said, partly the Dr. Steiner built the first Goethe Anum out of his own etheric love body. This is only, from a rational point of view, difficult to grasp. This is only, I think, from a very spiritual perspective, we can get maybe a perception of what she tried to describe. Also, Ita Wegman in another text, his word, which proclaimed anthroposophy, built up the Goethe Anum etherically. The building was Rudolf Steiner's word condensed, and his own ether body had grown together with the work of art, had become inseparable from it. So here is the underlining, it had grown together. So in a way, he gave an element of his existing in these forms. Now we are in the house of Edith Marion, and which is very fitting tonight, because she's one of the victims of the destructions of the first Goethe Anum. She was in a latent form, not ill before, but she had a disposition of tuberculosis in herself, and she was ill 10 years before, or a little bit less. But Steiner said, in that night, when all was destroyed, except the statue, it was inflaming her disease, her potential disease. And I think we all have the potentials of getting ill. In a way, one of the mysteries of human existence is that we have the tendencies for all these diseases in us. They are not diseases, as far as I understand them. Diseases are not strange to us, coming from the outside. A very common example is the cancer disease. We have always these forces of proliferation, uncontrolled proliferation, but they are balanced with the opposite. So in a way, the mystery of health is a mystery of balance. One of the masters to understand was Goethe. He was mastering his balance. So in a way, we all have a potential to become an epileptic seizure, but we keep it balanced. So it's a mystery of balance. And Ita Wegman said this is necessary to understand that. And in Steiner's case, he said to Mary Steiner, from January 23, my higher parts, my higher members of my being were detached partly. So these are the weeks or the days after the destruction of the first building. And yeah, we have some descriptions from Mary Savage, from Asya Turgenev, that his gait was changed in January 23. Until then, he was quite not a dancer, but let's say a eurythmist. Even he was 60 years old, more than, he was incredibly speedy and elegant. But then they said his gait became heavy in a way. With his strong will, he dominated his weak physical body. And the direct main problem, Ita Wegman said, was his instability to absorb nutrition. It became more and more difficult for him in 23, but extremely in 24, but not in September, the whole year, to eat. And this is maybe has to do with this so-called etheric body, because what we do if we eat, we transform the outer etheric substance in our own. And this struggle of transforming the outer world into the inner world, but on this etheric level, this was very difficult for him. So in the description, his own description, or Turgenev, he could direct his feet or his gait out of the eye and the astral body, but it's very difficult to do the same, or it is impossible to do the same with the element of nutrition. That's why very old people who die, they can't eat anymore, because the higher members of their existence, they are no more directly incarnated into the physical substance. So partly Dr. Steiner once said in a medical course, he said, leaving the earth, if you are very old, that means stopping to eat. Old people in the direction of dying, they stop eating, which we know from the clinic, from those who die at home. Now, in this sense, he was on the process of dying, but this was only one aspect, and he kept himself. And so I don't know how it was for Ita Wegman to accompany him the whole year 24, because she saw it, and he got thinner and thinner. And she tried all she could with those who undertook diets and prepared food for him. And when they went to England, to Torquay, to Arnhem, to Prague, it was always very difficult to organize cooking, because she knew that only soups and some other meals are good for him. And of course, he was a very polite man. Usually he did not say. And even if he said, they did not have the appropriate diet for him. So, and then September came with this program of 70 lectures, and these lectures do not tire me at all, he said to Ita Wegman. These lectures keep me healthy. But also she memorized his sentence, what tires me are the dead thoughts that are brought towards me, people's lack of reason, their lack of understanding. This is also, I think, Steiner under tension. He was always so tolerant and said, they grasp things, and if not in the night, and if not next year. So, but now he came to his limits. And I think that most of those professional groups, or the members who went to the Karma lectures in September, or the class lessons, they were well received. But on the other side, there is this statement, maybe not enough. Or so in a way, he was struggling. And this struggle did not start 1st of October, no, before. A lack of understanding and personal desires. This is not a good mixture to receive anthroposophy if the lack of understanding but egotism is there. And Ita Wegman said that she never could forget that what he said to her in weeks before, or we don't know, but he said to her how the anti-Michaelic demons they are acting so strong, and they try to obstruct and destroy Michael's work. So I don't know, if we think in the direction of the year 24, we quite often we say all these courses, all these initiatives, and so this positive balancing, this kind of what a nonsense. And it was the Christmas conference was a kind of a birth moment. Now, last week I said in the lecture it was more a conception than a birth, and the birth was maybe in September, so 9 months in between. I would say it was the birth time of the School for Spiritual Science in September 24. I know that we had 9 months of class lessons before, but I would say what came to Earth in September 24 were the sections together with the class lessons. So in a way, in these 19 days, you could perceive what does anthroposophy means, but also needs in the field of medicine, in the field of priest's work, in the field of artists' work, what kind of schooling path is needed, and it came together. So it was the first time that Dr. Steiner could show for several disciplines, professions, what high school means, and at the same time 7 class lessons and so on. So partly it was a birth, and it's good to show this light and warmth, but he also said strong forces are working against. So we can't overjump this problem if we think in the direction of the disease. We know from the course of the 20th century what darkness prepared itself. And unfortunately, this darkness never vanished since. I mean, we had periods where the light came back very strong, but if we now think in these regions of war and darkness, there are historians who say that with the First World War, something started which is not resolved until now. And they have good reasons. They are not occult researchers. They only look from a historical perspective, the unsolved problems of nationalism, imperialism, racism, and so on and so on. We can say it was also present in the 19th century, but in a way a door was opened, but not the door to the spiritual way, but maybe more the door to the abyss. And I only wanted to giving also the atmosphere that the other powers were also there. And it is maybe not necessary to talk all the time about it, but I think it is clear that you can't only see Steiner and he's bringing and saying and doing, but there was also others. And it's not needed to always identify them in single individualities, but it's part of the atmosphere around him. So it is also a question for the Anthroposophical Society, because was there enough protection for him? And protection by maybe not by guardians, by guards, but a protection by awakened consciousness, a protection by knowing about what has to be done by him, and not for our own sake, but for civilization, and so on. Yeah, it is very difficult, and I can't say that it's easy to give a clear statement, but tonight we only have the idea to come a little bit closer to the reality of the situation 100 years ago. Now, in the next 10 minutes, I will try to just shape a little bit, to make a sketch of those 6 months, and then I will give the word to Constanza Kaliks in the sense of what Steiner went on working, and these were the leading thoughts. And I also don't want to talk about 6 months now, because we have 6 months time. Of course, we don't want to have lectures all the time, and we won't do it. But in a way, for me, it would not be possible to talk now here about the 30th of March in 1925. In a way, I wonder how we can live in these next 6 months, a little bit also with the consciousness to accompany, not accompany him in a direct sense because it's 100 years ago, but it was quite a process. And if we read the leading thoughts in the next 6 months, this is not only an interesting development of a book, now it's a book, but at this time, these were messages coming weekly in the newspaper, in the Goethe Annum, in the news sheet. And people waited for these texts. And they came out of the studio. They knew he's ill. But when the news sheets are coming out, it was every Sunday, but the locals got them at Friday and so on. I think there was an enormous waiting, a situation of desire in a good sense, in a situation of expectancy, of hope. And I wonder a little bit if we have a possibility to go in these texts with this kind of, that they are anew for us, that they have the dignity to be anew. All those things which are well known tend to be old or tend to be dead. The dignity of being anew, it is always a miracle also with books, or that we have a direct encounter. And this would be quite important, I think, for the next 6 months. So I only want to sketch a little bit, and mainly the atmosphere. Ita Wegman said, we lived in quiet seclusion. We lived in quiet seclusion. Wir lebten in stiller Abgeschiedenheit, is the German translation. 2 of them. So she really lived next door or inside the same room sometimes. It's big enough, but she really took care for him as a nurse, as a doctor, as a companion. They went on meditating together. And she said Christian Rosenkreuz played an important role in these meditations. He said in a letter, not to her, I must keep everything destructive from me. What was destructive for Dr. Steiner? We don't know. Maybe elements of the egotism of the members, destructive in the sense of time-consuming or consuming forces. Destructive also the conflicts in the society, and the conflicts also in the council, executive council. So Maurice Steiner was very positive at the beginning, responding to him and said, I'm absolutely fine that you are in the atelier, your small room at home. But times went on and he was so miserable, and she reflected, is this really the right place to be? And of course she knew that Ita Wegman was also there, and Steiner quite often ended his letters to Maurice Steiner with greetings from Ita Wegman and appreciation of her help, and that she's sacrificing all her time, and she's joyful about the successful Eurythmy tour, but there was never greetings back. So you can see it from the correspondence. It was difficult for Maurice Steiner, and there is also a sentence where, when she's saying it was beginning of November and 2 weeks later she will come back, I'm almost afraid to return to Dornach and maybe tire you. I probably served you best with the work I did abroad. What a difficult statement to read, to write, to think in this direction, that it's better if she is in Hamburg giving Eurythmy tours. there is no response by him in, as far as I can see, in the still existing correspondence. Maybe he could not answer in a proper way. But I think also these are also exhausting elements. Even it is quite easy to understand Mary Steiner, and it's not a typical love question, love story, but of course she wanted to be there. She wanted to take care for him, and obviously this was not her right place. And when she came back then, last 3rd of November, he organized that she's coming every day to him for 1 hour. It's very hard to reduce this community of 20 years to 1 hour. So it was a very difficult time for her as well. But then there were others, destructive powers, really destructive. So all those groups who made quite strong efforts that there is never a second Goethe-Ahnung. Steiner got the license to build the day before he gave the last address, the official license, but then they started, these groups, these organizations, Swiss Conservation Society, and architects, painters, sculptors organized in saying no, this shameful monument which harms the reputation of the entire Swiss country. Catholic opponents suspected him still as heretic, demagogue, and there was quite a wave. And protests, demonstrations, and at least they said there should be a total free architecture. There should be a competition, not the design of Dornach. Not to build in this particular style would mean to deny the essence of anthroposophy in its very home, was Dr. Steiner's official answer. Not to build in this particular style would mean to deny the essence of anthroposophy in its very home. What a sentence. And it's also sometimes hurting for us in other places of the world if the particular style is not fulfilled. But here he said, in the essence, in its very home, the essence should be there. He had kind of support by the local authorities, and at the end they won the game. And he kept the license to build, and we have the Goethe-Ahnung not as private possession, but it came. Even if it was opened in 28 and not in 24 or 25, which was meant to be. But I only say this is the forces around. But he went on, and there are some others, I just summarize. But he went on. And this is, for me, most striking and convincing, how he went on. So the leading thoughts, you will hear from them, and it's incredible what he did from October on, how the leading thoughts were transformed. Of course, now it became his only organ of expression to bring anthroposophy, and what he wanted to bring in the lectures now had to go into the leading thoughts, reflections, contemplations about Ahriman and Michael, and the fight for human intelligence, and those incredible themes in October and November especially, and then the December themes, preparing Christmas, and then the themes of January about the earth and the macrocosmos. So if we follow the path of the leading thoughts, I would say reflections, contemplations, and then the final sentences, this is what he brought, Dr. Steiner. in an enormous way. And he wanted to prepare new editions of the Karma lectures, the last he gave. And he wanted to prepare an edition of the curative education course. We know it from Ita Wegman, because Ita Wegman wrote to Helene Fink, Dr. Steiner wants to have the material to prepare the edition. Now, this week, we will have the foundation of the new section at the Goethe-Arnhem, the 12th section, curative education and inclusive social development. And the education course given in June 1924, he wanted to work it out for the future, but also the karma questions. And he went on a little bit as far as he could to finish the book with Ita Wegman, The Fundamentals of Therapy. So positive. And also in conversations, famous is the one with Polzer Hoditz, 11th of November. He described him how to go on building up the first class and later on the second and the third. The first class, he said to Polzer Hoditz, as far as Polzer Hoditz documented, for all members of the society who want to become members of the school. And the second class he intended to have, following Polzer Hoditz, is for those who overtake responsibilities in the societies, in the Anthroposophical society, in intersections. So they need a schooling path for overtaking this special responsibility, which is more than a normal responsibility as a school member, which is an enormous responsibility, school membership alone, but the society and the sections are a specific field. And then the third class intended, as he said to Polzer Hoditz, following Polzer Hoditz notes, this is for leading the Goethe-Arnhem in the future, so more or less for the council, the leading group. And he sketched also a little bit what kind of teaching it will be. I only want to mention the theme, and I only mention it here not to say moving things, and a lot of you already know, but to say he never thought last address. We say last address, but he went on, building up the School for Spiritual Science, but also the sections, the faculties. So there are many other examples where you can see that it was just born, the high school, maybe after 9 months in September, but now the first steps as a child, to learn the upright position, to learn to go, to learn to speak. The School for Spiritual Science should find an upright position and then learn to go and learn to speak. That means in the realm of education or in the field of medicine, yes, to find the position, the upright gesture, and to go into the world and to act on the basement of a schooling path. So I just want to say he went absolutely on. And some of you know that he, in January, prepared the next edition for his book, Occult Science, with a new foreword. And in March 25, he still created a new cover for the calendar of the Selg. And we know that also the Christian community got an important impact by him in February 25, and I could summarize other. So I only wanted to say, we shouldn't say end of September activity stopped. It went on from the studio as far as he could. The other powers went on as well. On Dr. Steiner's birthday, in 27th of February, Hitler founded his party anew. So he founded the NSDAP anew and gave a long speech about Germany's future. So these other powers, they had no Christmas conference. They prepared another action or yeah, maybe it's enough for this sketch. Just opening the situation which started in October and went on till end of March. And as I mentioned yesterday, or last week in our meetings, he took in the last 13 members to the School for Spiritual Science on the 28th of March. And the 29th of March, the day before he went, he gave to Ita Wegman the corrections of the proofs of their book about fundamentals of therapy, and said to her in giving her the paper, something significant has been given with this book. And I think, yeah, anthroposophy is not medicine, and this was only one aspect of his many gifts, but in a way the healing aspect for the earth, in education, in medicine, the healing aspect is a central aspect in Dr. Steiner's biography and work. Until the sickbed, healing forces went out to the world. And it is a moving thought that he was so ill and he had to go, but he prepared totally what could come. So also in the sense of the unborn souls, but also the germs in agriculture, in medicine, education, he prepared the ground, the soil, and for the activity. And so interesting, 3 years later, the building was there. Michael's castle, as he called it, with an element of humor. But the Michael impulse needs a house, but not for living on a private possession, but to go out. A house to leave, but a house to come back. A house to inspire the world and to expire impulses. Healing, activating impulses of resurrection, but also to collect human cells. And this is what the building started then to do since 28. And Dr. Steiner prepared. So in a way, I hope that it gives a certain image and ended here. And now we will hear more about the leading thoughts, another onset for the future. Thank you so much for listening to this sketch of 6 months. Thank you.
Also from my part, for those who are here at the House Marion and wherever you are. And today I would like to bring, in continuation to that what we just heard now about Rudolf Steiner's time from the 1st of October on, I would like to bring some little thoughts on his last written work that accompanied him during all those months, the so-called leading thoughts. And these leading thoughts will will have a new edition soon, in which we are working in the general anthroposophical section, also thanks to the very good work of Thomas O'Keefe, together with others, a translation into English, and the edition will be in the two languages, English and German, and also in the sense of this cosmopolitic impulse given by Steiner during his whole life, but also in these last months. What he did was fruitful for so many places around the world. We think that this will be also a good contribution to the coming year, 2025, and the coming years, to have one edition in these two languages together. And maybe this will also be of help for studying, going deeper, and also translating, maybe again and again, these leading thoughts, because all work of translation is a never-ending thing, not only from one language to the other, but in their own language, the understanding, the learning, the reading. Yeah, it is a very, we can say, dense work. And maybe the language is a language, I would like to say, for the 21st century. This very compact way of expressing what he developed through years, and we can say through the decades he was working. And then he brings all into very short, very dense, very intense thoughts, leading thoughts, or maybe guiding principles, we can translate it also, Leitsätze. And in a certain sense, we can say it is all there, but it is there to be unfolded, to be worked with, to be maybe internalized, and to be transformed, and transforming also our thinking, our understanding on what? On the human being. It is these leading thoughts, a condensation of the view on the human being as a cosmic reality, of the human being in his constitutive connection to the world and to the others. And in a certain sense, we can learn about this in these very, very dense expressions about the human being in his connection, and that will mean at the same time about the human being as a being of transition, about the human being as a being on thresholds. The human being is a being of relation, and knowledge is an act of relating. Knowledge is always to cross a border and to understand in new ways how to relate what we knew before to what we already don't know. And so we can say that both the human being himself and the knowledge, and Rudolf Steiner will say again and again that a human being becomes more and more human as more than he or she knows. And not to know as information, but the act of knowledge itself transforms us. If this knowledge is not only something happening on our intellectual level, but is deepening in our heart, is taking our feeling, is transforming our willing. And so in being human and in knowing, we are always at the same time connecting, relating, and going over thresholds or standing in front of thresholds. And these leading thoughts can lead us into that. I would even say through these leading thoughts, we are led to this threshold, that we can then overcome, and not to say then we overcome them, but through this overcoming of one knowledge threshold, new ones will appear. And this process of becoming in learning is something that we can really experience also going through this path of these leading thoughts. As we heard before by Peter Selg, he said these leading thoughts, Rudolf Steiner started to write them in February 1924, right after the Christmas conference, or some weeks after the Christmas conference. And we can say that until June, and it was weekly, they are all about, in a certain sense, the knowledge of the human being and the organization of the human being in his extended existence, the human being in his relation with the time after the threshold of death. And then in July, this huge topic of destiny, and I will come back to that. And from August on, explicitly, this relation to the time, the relation to what, as he writes in his letter, we can name Michael. And this Michael motive and the transformation of the human intelligence forces will accompany them, all these thoughts, the letters, the so-called Michael letters, and going to the end, the earth, the cosmos, and going, we can say, into the earth and to the ground of the earth. And even if we say that the topic of Michael and the transformation of intelligence will come from August on, in a certain sense, the whole leading thoughts are themselves, I would say, the realization of this cosmic intelligence that arrives in the heart of the human being. They lead us to exercise, to experience, and to actively develop a sense for this reality of an intelligence that will not live anymore just in our head, so to say, but that will cross our whole being and arrive out of our hearts and transform that what we are willing and able to do. And today I would like to quote and to read a little bit from 3 of these many letters and leading thoughts. And I'm very happy, and hopefully it will work technically, that you will see, before we are totally ready to be able to publish the book, we hope that in the coming weeks we will be so far with the work that we will start to make the book ready, and then it will be published, this 2-language edition, German, English edition. But you will see parts of our ongoing work, and I will read them, some little parts of this. And maybe just for you to know how it will be, I would like to start with the first one, where Rudolf Steiner says what anthroposophy is. In the very beginning, there is the opening on what is anthroposophy. And then we will go into a letter, into a writing of the 13th of July. And I will introduce a little bit also the surroundings, so to say. And finally, we will go to the letter that appeared, that was published on the 1st of February with the date of the 25th of January, where Rudolf Steiner speaks or writes about the earth in the relation to the human being. And in all of them, it's all the time about the human being in his relation to the cosmos, to the world, in his relation to himself, in his relation to the spiritual reality on earth, in his earthly life. Yeah, so maybe we can start then with the first one. And the first one have the date of the 17th of February 1924. And maybe we can see it. Nicolas Kribles will be so kind to help. And the page is 80 and 81. Hopefully you will, wait for the moment in which you can see the book. Hopefully not so long time. And as soon as you have it, you can, Is it visible? Wonderful. And I will read the first sentences. It starts with, Anthroposophy is a path of knowledge that would guide the spiritual in the human being to the spiritual in the universe. So it starts. Anthroposophy is a path of knowledge. It's very clear. It's a path of knowledge. And this path of knowledge wants to guide that what is spiritual in the human being to that what is spiritual in the universe, in the wholeness of the universe, in the Weltenall. It's the word in German. And it continues, it arises in the human being as a need of the heart and of the life of feeling. It arises in the human being as a need of the heart and of the life of feeling. And here we have what anthroposophy is. It is a path of knowledge that arises as a need in the heart and in the feeling. And for those who knows the so-called micro letters that will start, as we heard before, in August, we can already hear them here. When then Rudolf Steiner will say that with this intelligence that comes down to the human being as a gift, we can say, as a gift for freedom and in danger from then on, at the same time, this gift of intelligence, he says, can dive into our heart and the hearts will start to have these thoughts. And here we already see it as a seed when he says, anthroposophy is a path of knowledge that arises in the human being as a need of the heart. Already we have it, this knowledge that is a need of the heart. This Michaelic, we can say, gesture is there from the very, very beginning. We can say is in a certain sense the seed for all that what will then come. I read it again. Anthroposophy is the path of knowledge that would guide the spiritual in the human being to the spiritual in the universe. It arises in the human being as a need of the heart and of the life of feeling. And again, in the very beginning, we see the essence of knowledge. The essence of knowledge is all the time relating, to bring together, to unite to bring into dialogue. And he says, and what? That what lives in the human being as spiritual to that what lives in the world as spiritual. This is, he says, he writes Anthroposophy. And later he will say that this arises in those who are connected to Anthroposophy, who feels this need arising in their hearts as an elemental need of life, just as one feels hunger and thirst. An elemental need of life, eine Lebensnotwendigkeit, an elemental necessity, we could say, of life, in the same way as we feel hunger and thirst, a path of knowledge as an elemental need of life. So it starts, clearly saying it is a threshold, because we want to bring together things that are there, the spirituality in the human being, the spirituality in the world, and Anthroposophy, a path to cross the separation, to bring it together as a need felt in the heart. Yeah, and now I would like to go further and to enter a little bit, and it's really just a little glimpse, I would say, in this letter, we can say a letter, or in this writing, that was published on the 13th of July 1924. And I will first make a little introduction and then we would go into the text. And it's very, very special and also connected to the work that I have done for many years in the Department for Youth here at the Goetheanum, and now in the Department for Education, that we can see that this topic that Rudolf Steiner addresses here, and the title is Understanding of the Spirit, the Conscious Experience of Destiny. That means he will talk about destiny, about a conscious experience of destiny, as some approach to understand about the spiritual reality of the human being, that this appears in the same day when also something else was published. And this was what was published were two questions that Rudolf Steiner proposed to the young people, and the person who was working with the Department of Youth, Maria Röschel-Leers, she then wrote it for them. And for these two questions, the young people was invited to write answers, written answers, that should be sent until the 26th of July. So clearly they had 2 weeks to respond to these two questions. And a little bit later then Rudolf Steiner will, so it will be very, very alive in a certain sense, also in these groups, how to respond to that. Yeah. And these two questions were, what do I want as a young person? And then, how do you imagine that the world should be in the year 1935 in the field that you have in mind as a professional vocation? Again, what do I want as a young person? And how do you imagine that the world should be in the year 1935 in that field that you have in mind as a professional vocation. And if we think on these two questions, what do I want as a young person? And how I imagine that the world will be in 1935, so in a period of more than 10 years, in that field that I have in mind as my professional vocation, we are in the midst of the question of destiny. So what I want, what I long for as a young person, and how I imagine the world being in a specific field, not the world as a whole, but in this field where I feel I can contribute, or I would like to contribute in my life for the world's questions, for the world's needs. And so we can see that the question of destiny posed here also in the leading thought is a question that is being moved, that existing, is something that is being talked about, a question that is real, a question that is posed, so to say, to those who are there. Yeah, and so I would like to go a little bit into some parts of this writing. It's one of the longest, we can say, well, not of the very longest, but it's not so short as others, and I would like to underline some aspects today. And so maybe we can see it. It's page 168, 169. And I would like to start, so I will jump a little bit. The idea is that you see how the text will look like, so that you are already thinking that would be a wonderful possibility to study the text, but I will not read the whole. So it's just for you to have kind of a support for my reading now. And I will start in the second paragraph, and I will just read it first. The understanding of anthroposophical truth can be furthered if the existing relation between the human being and the world is constantly brought before the human soul. The understanding of anthroposophical knowledge, we also can say a canon, can be furthered if the existing relation between the human being and the world is constantly brought before the human soul. Again, we see the essence of knowing. It's bringing together the relation, it's relating that what the human being is and what the world is in the human soul, bringing that together. And then he will describe this relation for the human soul, this bringing together of what lives within the soul and that what lives in the world. And this relation we will see, I will read it, will in a certain sense be interwoven together, will become something kind of a fabric. And in this fabric, we will see something new for the consciousness appear. And what will appear is the perception of destiny. The perception of destiny, not as a reading of the facts, but out of this bringing together of what lives in my soul and what lives in the world. So Rudolf Steiner says that the I can contemplate himself, being in himself, but the I can also contemplate the world. And I would like now to read from page 170, 171. Where the experience to be reversed and where the attention to be directed to the inner life in which the world is mirrored, then those life destiny events emerge into consciousness into which our human self has flowed from the point of time to which our memory reaches back. In the results of these destiny events, a human being experiences his own inner essence. Insofar as a person brings to consciousness, I, with my own self, have experienced an event of destiny, he can enter into a consideration of the world. He can say to himself, I was not alone in my destiny. The world played a part in my experience. I willed this or that. The world streamed into my will. I find the world in my will insofar as I experience this will in self-contemplation. In continuing to live into his own self in this way, the human being ceases to be conscious of the self, and he becomes conscious of the world. He ceases to experience himself. He begins to become aware of the world in feeling. I send my thoughts out into the world. There I find myself. I sink into myself. There I find the world. If a person experiences this strongly enough, then he stands in the midst of the great riddles of the world and of the human being. Well, this is astonishing because it's a process of knowledge, and he describes this process of knowledge, experiencing the world, and then the world in myself, experiences myself, and then myself in the world, and this interwovenness. And if the human being can really experience this strongly enough, then he will stand in the midst of one of the greatest riddles of the world. That is a process of an experience of knowledge that leads us into a riddle. I want to read again this sentence. I send my thoughts out into the world, and there I find myself. I sink into myself, and there I find the world. If a person experiences this strongly enough, then he stands in the midst of the great riddles of the world and of the human being. Yeah, this as an experience of our destiny. My destiny is that what flows into myself from coming from the world, and in that what is flowing into myself from the world, I recognize my own will. And in doing so, I am in the midst of a riddle. And then he will say that this experience is what we can reach through this path of anthroposophy. And I would like to go to another little part of this same writing. We are on the 13th of July 1924. On the next page, 172, 173. Good. For anthroposophy asserts that there is a spiritual experience which does not lose the world when thinking. One can also live in thought. Anthroposophy tells of an inward experience in which one does not lose the sensory world when thinking, but gains the spiritual world. Instead of penetrating into the I, in which the sensory world is felt to disappear, one penetrates into the spiritual world in which the I feels strengthened or established. Anthroposophy shows further that there is an experience of destiny in which one does not lose the self. In destiny, too, one can feel oneself to be active. Anthroposophy points out in the impartial, unegoistic observation of human destiny an experience in which one learns to love the world and not only one's own existence. Instead of staring into the world which carries the I on the waves of fortune and misfortune, one finds the I which shapes its own destiny voluntarily. Instead of striking against the world on which the I is dashed to pieces, one penetrates into the self, which feels itself united with the course of the world events. Yeah, we can say that here, in just these lines, we have really core thoughts on whole anthroposophy. And this in the reflection on what destiny is. This flowing of the will into myself coming from the world, and in this thinking that doesn't loses the relation to life. And then in this, he says, anthroposophy points out the observation of human destiny and as a learning of the love to the world, and not only to their own existence. And then this experience of the I as an experience of being united with the course of the world's events, mit dem Weltgeschehen, with this happening of the becoming of the world. And if we think on the very beginning, where he said that anthroposophy is a path of knowledge, that means a path of bringing relations into experiences, we are in the core of all experiences when he says that we will learn to experience ourselves as united to the becoming of the world. And this as the core of the expression of our destiny. Yeah. Now I would like to go to the third moment of this evening, and as you can see, they are very short in a certain sense, just pointing out some of these moments in this path that he describes through these leading thoughts. And it is this letter that that appears on the 1st of February 1925. And here the title is, What is the Earth in Reality Within the Macrocosmos? We can see in July the destiny then we will have this unbelievable openness. We can say it's kind of a sun coming up. It's a sunrise of this expressed Michaelic gesture, the relation of the human being to a new possibility to think, and through that to become aware in the knowledge of the relation to the cosmos and now the earth. And in this writing, he will develop as a core idea what we will see is, he names it as a germinating gesture, the germ, that what germinates as a seed, as this powerful potential that can be unfolded. And he will describe that in a certain sense, the earth came into a moment in which the forces which were living to form out of the cosmos the earth, these forces in a certain sense stepped back. And human being is not connected to them directly anymore, but then the human being can sense them in nature, in that what we can experience in nature, in the germs of the plants, this germination power that is in the plants, the germination power that is also in all the realms of nature. And it is, I would say, also a big riddle. How can the human being experience this direct relation to something that lives as a potential to be unfolded on earth? Yeah, and so I would like to read some lines of this text. And it would be page 554, 555. Yeah? No? It's not? Okay, good. Then I will just read it without the text. I think maybe we can hear it, and then the next page will be there. Because the human being derives the forces for his self-consciousness from the earth, the human being is far too close to it in his inner life to perceive its nature clearly. Because the human being derives the forces for his self-consciousness from the earth, the human being is far too close to it in his inner life to perceive his nature clearly. Yeah, so we are too close to these forces. And then he will develop and say, but the human being is able to sense these germinative forces, these seed forces in nature. He can perceive the germinating force in the plants. He can feel, he can see these germinating forces as forces that were there in the macrocosmos, and now he can meet them on earth as microcosmos. And he says, in this way, spirit seeing consciousness beholds the essence of the earthly realm, which stands as a new life enkindling element within this dying macrocosmos. And now maybe we have the page 558, 559, thank you. Just as when the old plant has died and fallen away, the new plant, however large, is formed again from the seed or from the germ in a space so modestly small. So while the old dying macrocosmos falls away, a new macrocosmos comes forth from this speck of dust, the earth. It is a true contemplation of the being of the earth, which sees in it everywhere a germinating universe. And we only learn to understand the kingdoms of nature around us when we feel in them the presence of this germinating life. And then the next page, 560, 561. In the second paragraph, the past throwing its shadows and the future filled with the seeds of the germination of a new reality encounter each other in the human being, and their encounter constitutes human life of the present time. The past, I read it again, throwing its shadows, and the future filled with the germinating seeds of a new reality encounter each other in the human being, and their encounter constitutes human life of the present time. So here the human life is constituted by this encounter of what was from the past, and we can say died, and this germinating seeds of the future, and in this interwovenness we have the human life's present time. And then it continues. The fact that matters are so constituted is clearly revealed to seeing consciousness the moment one enters the spirit region immediately bordering the physical realm, in which the active presence of Michael is to be found. The life of everything earthly becomes clear and transparent when we feel at its foundation the germination or the seed of a new cosmos. Every single plant and stone appears in a new light to the human soul when one becomes aware that each of these creations is contributing by its life or by its form to this great fact that the earth in its unity is an embryo, the seed of a macrocosmos newly rising into life. The life of everything earthly becomes clear and transparent when we feel at its foundation the seed of a new cosmos. Every single plant and stone appears in a new light to the human soul when one becomes aware that each of these creations is contributing by its life or by its forms to this great fact that the earth in its unity is an embryo, the seed or the germ of a macrocosmos newly rising into life. Yeah, so here the earth as an embryo, as a germination, as a germinative seed into life. And this as a knowing, knowledge experience of the human being. And I would like to close now just summarizing a little bit the first the very first leading thought is the description of anthroposophy as a path of knowledge that can unite, that can bring together the spiritual reality that lives into the human being, in the human being, to the spiritual reality that fulfills, that is transpassing the wholeness of the world. And we will see it in different moments of these leading thoughts. As an example, in this experience of the destiny, as the will coming, my will coming to me, to the encounter to me through that what I experience in the world. And then here, again, in the earth, as the coming together of that what was already there and needed to die, with that what already is there and will unfold into life. And maybe this is also a gesture in the sense of what we heard before about this last months in Rudolf Steiner's life. If we think this is from the beginning of February or the end of January 1925, the earth as an embryo of future life, the destiny as an awareness of the I that is connected to the world's becoming, and anthroposophy as a path that makes possible these two realities of the spiritual being in the human experience and in the world to come together. So thank you very much for your attention, and it is a pleasure to greet you here in the name of the General Anthroposophical section, and hopefully you will in the coming months maybe go back or go for the first time to this very fruitful and I would say germinative writings that Rudolf Steiner dedicated himself to until the very end of his life. Thank you very much and have a good evening.